when I went to college, I really didn't want to go. My father wanted me to go. I ended up studying economics, which didn't do me a bit of good. When I got out of college, I decided to be an actor. I thought that was going to be the big thing. I went to Hollywood. Didn't do too well. But I decided I really wanted to do this, and I went back to New York and studied with a top teacher who was Win Hanman, who, by the way, is 95 years old now. He coached Denzel Washington and many, many others. After that, I went back to Hollywood. And I made a picture called A Time for Dying. Didn't do too well. I then went to Mexico, where my father was a big publisher of music in Mexico. And I worked with my father. Naturally, let me back this up a little bit. I'm going to back it up to my grandmother. I hung around my grandmother a lot when I was very, very young. And through osmosis, I think I learned how to pick a song. And then when I was with my father, through more osmosis, I learned how to pick a song. I met my wife on the golf course. Here was this 15-year-old girl, could hit the ball a mile. Well, I was on the green, and a ball landed next to me. I looked at it, I looked up, and well, I see this cute little girl. Good looking. Well, I became very good friends with her father. We played golf together. He was a pro. Maria's whole family are pros. Roberto Di Vincenzo, who's a world-class pro, was her uncle, who signed the Masters card wrong. If you know anything about golf, that's a major thing. Well, one thing led to another. We got married. And I decided to go into the record business. I made my first record, and I thought it was good. 2 years, I went all around Mexico, all through the United States. No one would even listen to me. Finally, this little radio station in Mexico City played it. It became a huge hit. Well, I didn't know what I was doing because I had no idea what a hit record was. So a store would call me up and say, send me 50. I said, I'll send you 100. Well, the long story short, the guy never paid me. I eventually went out of business. But I had to leave Mexico because Christina, my oldest daughter, was born with a problem with her lungs. Well, we had to go back up to Jersey. Well, during my time in Jersey, I kept saying, I like that Texas music. I like the Texas music. So I told my wife one day, pack up. We're going to Texas. Well, I got to Texas. And I met this gentleman, Manuel Rangel, who heard of my record that I had a hit with. And he helped me get into the Texas business. Rangel helped me because he bought 3,000 units of the record Tonto. The guy who I made a deal with in California paid me for 2,000. So if one distributor bought 3,000, how many units were sold by the other distributors? Rangel then said, look, produce and I'll distribute your records. There we go. We're in Texas. We're with the best distributor in the business. And I started recording. I then met this gentleman, Manny Guerra, who I consider to be the best of the best in recording. I already had 3 or 4 more artists from Mexico I was working with. I'll bypass that. I'll jump straight to Tejano. That's what we're interested in. This gentleman called me from the Valley. There was a good friend with Chuy Santos. He said, well, would you record for me, produce for me this group I think is good? I said, Chuy, of course. Send it to me, let me listen to it, and I'll do my best. Well, in comes Jimmy and Joe. Mas. We record the first album. Does nothing. I told my friend, don't press too many records. Now I'm going to back up a little bit. At 3 o'clock in the morning, Jimmy Gonzalez, the arranger, the whole thing, he was the whole thing, calls me up and says, Bob, I got a name for the group. I said, what's the name? He said, Mas. I said, oh, no, I don't like that. I said, M-A-S-S? No, he says, M-A-Z-Z. I love it. So now we got Mas. First album sits in that poor guy's house. 3,000 records. They're all in his living room. He didn't sell a record. We start the second album. Now he's got 6,000 records in his living room. Doesn't sell a record. I said, I didn't know what to do. Chewy, what do you want me to do? He said, would you buy all my records and the contract for $3,000? Now, I happen to have loved this group. I said, definitely I will. The third album, we record a song called Laura Ya No Vive Aquí, written by Luis Silva. Boom, it explodes. Absolutely explodes. Now we got a big record. So, at that point, I had to actually leave San Antonio because I wanted to take the kids for a vacation. But we had enough business going on where I didn't have to hang around. Jimmy and Joe are tough to handle. I mean, there's no question about it. This is a tough crew, a very tough crew, but they're very talented. But I thought my secretary, Betsy, could handle it. So off I go to California, and I'm driving through El Paso. And I hear this song, La Leona, on the radio. And I told Maria, I said, listen, I want to know who sang that. Listen to it carefully. Listen. Let's catch it. La Mafia. I said, boy, I like that. Picked up the phone. I said, called up Luis. Luis, I want you to find the Mafia. I want you to sign them. Luis calls me back. He says, they're already under contract. I said, oh, come on, Luis. Really? He said, yes. Well, I go to California. We were in California, and all of a sudden, Manny Guerra calls me and says, Bob, that group you liked, the Mafia, they're right in front of me here in the studio. You want them? They'll sign with you. Sign them. Right now, sign them. Can I do the album? I said, definitely. Do the album. He sends me the album about 3 weeks later. I called him up. I said, Manny, this kid doesn't sing too good. He's not that good of a singer. Manny tells me, he said, Bob, it's so commercial, don't worry about it. Now, Oscar's going to call me when he sees this and say, what do you mean I don't sing? It's okay, Oscar, you know as well as I do you're not a great singer. The album comes out, and I went to see him play. They were opening for Moss on a football field. Now here comes this nice bunch of kids walking down, like a majorette, and they're walking down the field. And this is Mafia. I said, oh my God, what am I into? They get up on the stage, and Oscar just puts on a performance that was wonderful. And I said, you know what? Moss has got a problem. This group is good. They dress beautifully. Well, Joe gets out of a limo. He's got his T-shirt on. Walks up on the stage, and the place goes crazy. He's still the king. They had 5 limos waiting out there so Joe could get to a limo, and no one would know which limo he went off. Joe was the king. All right, now I got these 2 groups. Jimmy comes up to me one day from Moss. He says, Bob, we got 2 bulldogs in one cage. We got a problem. I said, Jimmy, I'm not changing. Jimmy, okay. Now we go, and I'm in Houston, and I hear this guy singing Una Rosa para Una Rosa, Ram Herrera. I said, I have to have him. I said, what a singer. Well, I ended up getting him. Went through hell to get him, but I got him. Now I had 3 good artists. Then David Lee Goddessa came in. Now this is where a story comes to life. He had this young kid called Emilio Navarra singing for him. Emilio was just a great kid. But Emilio says to me one day, I'd like to be on my own. I said, well, that's up to you. I'll sign you. I really believe in you. But I think you should wait until we get something. Well, every Monday, we met for lunch for almost a year. And one day, I was walking into my office, and there is this humble, very humble man sitting at the corner. Betsy's telling him to get out, and he wouldn't get out. He's just sitting there like this in the corner. He said, I want to see Mr. Grever. I said, Betsy, what's going on? I want to see him. So he comes into my office. I said, what can I do for you? He said, I want to sing you my song. Sure, I'd love to hear it. He sings, Que sensaciones me dan. Well, I said, well, you got any else? Anything more to it? He said, no. I said, I love it. Finish it. Because it just rang a bell. That's the song for Emilio. Well, he finishes the song. I go get Emilio. I said, get out of the David Lee Goddessa contract. Get out of it. I got the song. We can make it. I really got a good song. We record the song. I put it on the radio in Houston. It becomes a huge success. I had put Emilio with a manager who could help him putting together a group, getting instruments, he had the money to do it. Well, he hears the song on the radio and he says, that's the worst song I've ever heard. I've never heard anything. Get it off the radio. I said, I thought it was pretty good. He said, it's terrible. Oh, okay. I called up the radio station. Can you take it off? The manager thinks it's terrible. He said, Bob, this is the biggest hit we've had in years. We're not taking it off. Wow. It really hits big. Big. Emilio is launched. In fact, he becomes my #1 artist. Now there's a knock at my door. I'm saying, who is this? I go to my front door, and there's this little girl, 12 years old. Selena. I open the door, and in comes this little girl, 12 years old. And she comes in and she says, can I sing for you? She was with her father and her sister, her mother. And they come into the house. I said, yeah, come on into the house. And my dad was there. Now, my dad was a big music man, huge. And she gets up and dances and sings and does it all. My father took one look at her. He says, sign her. Sign her. Don't let her walk out the door. I said, Dad, she's 12 years old. I can't take this girl on a promotional trip. I can't do it. What am I going to do with her? He said, sign her. Worry about that later. All right. When my father said, do something, I did it. I signed her. Well, what happens after that is I couldn't really deal with her the way an artist should be dealt with. But yet we made records, and yet we did promotion that we could do. And she was starting to climb the ladder like this. Well, it reached a point where I couldn't handle her. So I called up my friend from Capitol Records. I said, I can't handle this girl. She is going to explode. Take her. I'll give her to you because she deserves to be a superstar. So now Selena was in my company and out of my company. But she always said, when she see me, she'd say, how's Papa? Always, always, always. Well, she has a habit of bringing a tear to my eyes. Because Selena now is in and out of my company. It's one of the biggest tragic things that happened to the Tejano music. I then moved on with Emilio. Now, Emilio was just destined to be a superstar. And he was. He was. My childhood was really, really exceptional. My dad, who was into the music business but had no business at all, he was broke. Totally, completely busted. So he would go into New York and look for a job. Couldn't find one. These were tough times back then, very tough times. So he'd come back, and one day I walked up to this golf course, and they ran out of caddies, and I took 2 bags on my shoulder. I was 8 years old. Carried them around, crying. I was in so much pain. I was crying. But I got $6. And I walked up the hill to our house, and I gave it to my mother. And my dad was there. He said, where did you get that money? I said, Dad, I went up to this golf course, and I carried 2 bags around. He said, tomorrow we're all going up. Well, the 3 of us, my brother, myself, and my dad, went up to the golf course. For 3 years, he caddied and we caddied. Now, that took care of our weekends, but we always managed to go out and see my grandmother, who was Bob Grever. And I would spend 2 or 3 hours with her, listening to her. and she had a stroke, and her right side was totally paralyzed. Now you can imagine. She'd sit at the piano, and she would go, dun, 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 with one finger. Now she could play the piano, but she would do it with one finger. Dun, ding, 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 ding. And I'm listening, and I hear, dee 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 dum, dee dee dum, da 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 dum, da da dum. Well, it becomes a huge hit, Tippy Tippy Tin. So, now I grew up around that. And between the caddying and my grandmother and my dad, who was a magnificent person, he finally got a job working nights in a factory. So he would work nights in the factory, put his suit on at the factory, go down to the music center and try to start a company. This is a man who had nothing. And I'm at the golf course, carrying the bags around, and my brother and I. And my dad is working the factory and working the music business. He finally gets some people who became interested in what he was doing. He was trying to get the American songs into Mexico and collect the money that was due for these songs. Well, little by little, this guy came with him, this guy came with him, that guy came with him, this guy came with him. He started to build quite a company. That even gave me more knowledge, because I was with Herb Alpert for a couple of years in his company, learning the business. I was with, well, you wouldn't know them, but I was also with other companies that my father put me into that I kept learning, and I kept learning, and I kept learning. Now my dad, all of a sudden, is a major publisher in Mexico. Not of his own music, but of everybody else's music. He's handling all these music companies. One day he says to me, we can't have this. We got to stop this. We got to have our own company, our own music, our own songs. So that's what we're going to do from now on. We're going to put our money into our own songs. That's what he did. And I learned how to recognize an artist. That I learned. I remember when the Carpenters walked in, and they came into the office, and she was just really a lovely lady, and so was the boy. And I watched how they worked with them, and I watched when Herb came in and said, "This is the best singer I've ever heard." And when Herb tells you you're the best he's ever heard, whoa! I think it was pure osmosis. It just happened when you're around somebody that is as brilliant as she was. I mean, it's just. I remember when they were at dinner. I don't know what possessed her to do this. She said, "You people think I'm just a rag that you can throw in the corner." What a great line. Now, things like that went into me. I mean, that's a great line. And the effect she had on me was, I'm sure, was pure osmosis. She was very loving and but yet very harsh. She had piggy banks, real piggies. The piggy banks went like this. I got 50 cents. My brother, let me back that up. The biggest piggy bank was my cousin. He was the firstborn. He got $1. I was next in the piggy bank. I got 50 cents. Kenny was next. He got $0.25. That was my brother. And Patty was the last. She got $0.10. Well, Patty was older than Kenny and myself. So it showed a little favoritism towards the boys. But that was my grandmother. She had favorites. I remember we were in Carnegie Hall, and she couldn't walk, so we were in a wheelchair. And we were sitting out front, and I remember Nestor Chaitis was the singer. And they were this is all her music. And I was sitting next to her, and when they finished, they started screaming, well, not yelling, and where's Maria Grever? We want to see Maria Grever. Blah, blah. That place is jammed. And she couldn't get up. Now, I know she couldn't get up, but she forced herself up and turned and faced the audience. She forced herself up and turned and sat down. That's something. That's something. Let's take Hudame, who you were talking about. I remember they had a split screen. On one side, they had Palacio Dominguez. On the other side, they had Julio Iglesias. Julio. So they asked Placido. Neither one could hear the other one. They said, Placido, in your opinion, what's the best song ever written? Oh, he says, Hudame. They went over to, what was his name? Julio. I said, Julio, what's the best song ever written in Spanish? He says, Hudame. That says a lot. Now, remember when she wrote these songs, a woman walked 10 feet behind a man in Mexico. We're talking in the early, not the early, but the 1800s. And they walked behind a man. And she became extremely, extremely famous. When I'm in Mexico, my wife's name is Maria Grever. We have to be careful for kidnapping and so on. So when we go in, I tell her to keep her mouth shut. Don't mention your name. And about her songs, I remember, you have to remember, she was a child prodigy. She started writing when she was 7 years old.
And where was she living when she did that?
Probably in Spain. She went from Spain, and then she studied in France, and then she studied in Italy. They sent her all over. Her mother and father were a duke and duchess in Spain. Very wealthy family. You want a little background on that?
Please.
A very wealthy family. And you got to chuckle at this. They spent money like there was no tomorrow. When her father died, her mother would rent, not a little, I mean a major yacht, boat, big time boat. Put all the furniture from the castle in the boat and take it to Mexico. Take it to Veracruz, and then put it up to Mexico City and put it in the where she wanted to live for the 3 months. Then take it, pack it all up and send it back to Spain. Well, how long can you do that without being broke? She spent all the money. But yet she came back and won the Mexican lottery 3 times. So it was an amazing situation. My grandmother was born in León, Guanajuato, which is Mexico. That's where she was born. But she studied all around the world.
How many songs did she write?
I believe there's like 900. I have a catalog, but I don't have all 900.
Rattle off 3 that most musical lovers would know, besides the one you already mentioned.
Rattle off 3?
Name a 3. Just
Júrame, te quiero dijiste, y cuando vuelve a tu lado. Those are the 3 that would, you could ask any mariachi in this town, sing one of those songs. That's Maria Grever. My father was the biggest biggest, what would you call, what's the word?
Instrumental.
Instrumental person to catapult me forward, of course.
And what was his name?
Charles Grever.
Okay.
He,
If you had to describe him to us, how would you describe him? What kind of guy was he?
he was a man that believed in helping people. How could I describe him best? He was the man who carried golf bags around a golf course. He's the man that worked at nights in a factory and put a suit on in a day to try to develop a publishing company. He's a man who a person I remember walked up and he said, I have a problem with a physical problem and I need X amount of money. Here's the money, go fix your problem. He was a man who told me I said, Dad, I've gone as far as I can go. I can't go anymore. I got to get out of this. He said, what's the problem? I said, money. He said, how much you need? And I told him, he said, here, go fix it. Maria, he adored Maria. When she wanted something, she got it. She got it. He helped so many songwriters when they were down and out, really down and out. He bought their songs. Even though he didn't think they were that good, he bought their songs. I don't know, he was just one of these real exceptional men. Some of the groups that would come to me would sing a song, and I knew it was great. I knew it was right. I knew we could make money on it. I knew it would happen. In fact, a lot of times, an artist would walk into my office, and they say, we're interested in talking to you. Would you like to hear me sing? I said, no, I don't want to hear you sing. I don't have to hear you. I know you can sing. Well, how do you know I can sing if you don't listen to me? I said, I know you can sing. And that's the way I did my business. I knew for some reason, I could understand and feel that this person was an artist that could sing. And I just could feel it. And most of my artists that I had, when we would finish the album, I'd take it to the radio station and we would get it played. But another person had a very, very big influence on me, huge influence, was Manny Guerra. Manny Guerra is probably the best at recording an artist in this city. And when I got Carter Records, I took Carter Records from the bottom to about here. And I was stuck right here. Couldn't get it past this point. So I hired Manny Guerra. I said, I want you to get it past this point. I paid him a lot of money. Well, when we would take the record in to the radio station to play, they would look at the record and they wouldn't even listen to it. Bang, right on the turntable, because Manny Guerra's name was on it. Well, he took me from here to here. And then I sold Carter Records. I sold my dad's publishing company to this gentleman in New York who had Jive Records or Zamba. Well, when I met with him in Nashville, where he wanted to talk to me about buying the company, he said, the only way I'm going to buy it if you go with it. You have to go with it for 5 years. I have to go with it for 5 years. Well, okay, I'll go with it for 5 years. I sold the company. I go into the company. And the first year I'm there, very first year I'm there, he gets this group. The manager brought this group in and said, I got this group that I think is pretty good. But they're in this other company, and if you want them, you can have them for $200,000. My boss says, no, you tell them I'll give me 50,000 and I'll take them. Because he knew the group was under a contract that they had to record them, and that recording was going to cost $200,000. Well, the guy says, okay, he gave him the 50,000 and the group. Fine. I'm in Nashville, and Clive, the owner of the company, comes over and says, Bob, I want you to hear this. I listened to it and I said, gee, that's good. Well, what do you think the name of the group was? Backstreet Boys. We've got the Backstreet Boys. The Backstreet Boys get pissed at the manager and throw him out. The manager gets so irate that he forms another group. And he takes it in. He says, what do you want this group? You can have it. For nothing. Yeah. Who do you think was the lead singer? Justin Timberlake. In Sync. We got the two biggest acts in the world. Who is Justin Timberlake dating? Britney Spears. She comes into the company. Now we got the three biggest artists in the world in the company. My job was, I handled the Latin side, and I'm running around. Well, the boss disappears. He's gone for 6 months. We don't know what happened to him. He sold the company for $3 billion. Now,
Who was he? What was his name?
I'm sorry?
Who sold the company? The name of the guy that was the boss?
Clive Calder. Now, but Clive, look at the background on Clive. He was from South Africa. He was a bass player in a band. He sold the company for $3 billion. And you know, I didn't expect to get a nickel because he already gave me a lot of money. All of a sudden, they hand me a check for $100,000. And I went up to Clive. I said, Clive, I appreciate your generosity, but you didn't have to do this. He said, he had an accent, you know, you crazy? Of course I had to do it. Every time I went somewhere, you were there working. Of course I'm going to do it. He gave me a hug. That's what I did after I left the record company.